Greetings, hello, and welcome everyone to Age of Empires 4 on Xbox. I can't believe we have Age of Empires 4 here on Xbox. This video in particular, we're going to be going over the controller, showing you all of the tips and tricks on how to use the controller. This is a tutorial on how to get better at the controller. The game kind of shows you a lot of what you need to do here for the controller, but I wanted to kind of run through this quickly so you're not playing like 7 tutorial missions in the game, or if you've never played the game, this will be a great starting point. So, final thing to note is I will be making more Age of Empires guides, and there'll be a playlist on the channel for you to check out for videos for Age 4 on Xbox. And lastly, we have over 200 videos of Age 4 already covering Age 4 on PC, but we'll be making Xbox Ones as well, so check out the channel for those videos. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into Age 4 on console. The way Age 4 works is there's really your units are categorized in 2 different ways. There are economy units and military units. I guess maybe there's a third where you could classify religious units, but that's neither here nor there. Your town centers, we're going to be making the production of your villagers initially. This main building is your town center. You can drop off all your resources here and train new villagers. So the way you can select things in Age 4 is just by tapping A. And if you tap A one more time, you're actually going to be giving orders to those units. If you want to select more units, if you hold A, you're actually going to be getting a paintbrush, very similar to Halo Wars. And now I've selected all of these villagers, and we're walking around now. To select buildings, you tap A as well, and you can see there's a rally point flag here. You can actually change that by tapping A, and you deselect things by pressing B. If you want to train villagers, you hold the right trigger, and this radio menu comes up. The villagers right here is what we want. Now you can tap A once to build one, or you can tap it multiple times to train some. You're going to hit triangle to cancel. What I find to be really OP, and this is not available on the PC version, is at the bottom here at 6 o'clock, auto train villagers. You want to toggle that to on, in my opinion, because you're going to be making villagers automatically, and it's just kind of a strategy in Age of Empires 4. You always want to be making villagers. You really want to keep making villagers till you're at around 100 villagers, in my opinion. It's probably a really good stopping point to be making villagers, but nonetheless, if you just do this, you'll constantly be training villagers. You won't need to really worry about that. To continue to build buildings, so I'm going to actually need a house here coming up, is you select a villager and you just look somewhere. And then if you hold right trigger, another radio menu comes up with more buildings to build. This particular point in the game, I need to build a house. And you can send additional villagers to build another house. You can actually queue up multiple buildings. So let's say I wanted to build a second house. If I hold down the left trigger and tap A, I can actually queue up multiple buildings. And these villagers are smart enough where they will figure it out and move and build these buildings. Let's say I want to stop and not build any of these buildings. Like I changed my mind on this house. Just press A on the house, go up and hit the stop. Even when it's being built, you can do that as well. There's also a few other ways to select units on screen, and it shows here on the bottom left, so you don't forget. You can actually hold down Y, and you're going to actually select everything on screen. And I'm not really so sure how I feel about this, to be honest with you, which I actually just garrisoned everyone, because I'm kind of a Kevin. But when you select everything on screen, you're actually going to be selecting your villagers and your military. So I really find holding down Y to select all of your units probably better when you're in like a military engagement, if you will. That's probably where that will come in handy. All right, next up, let's say you have what's called idle villagers. This person here is not doing anything. Actually, all of these villagers right here aren't doing a whole lot, so they're just kind of standing around. You can see at the top that I have 9 idle villagers. Well, let's say I'm looking around somewhere else, and I don't know that I have idle villagers. So what you can do is you actually press up on the D-pad, and it will cycle through all of these idle villagers. And from there, you can kind of select them and tell them to go do something. Helps you kind of get a little bit of a management perspective of your civs. Let's say you want to queue up sub movement. So like one thing that's really important in Age of Empires is getting a lay of the land, seeing where you are and where your opponent is. But you don't want to necessarily watch your scout run around and babysit it everywhere. So what you can do is press A to have a unit move anywhere. And then while you're holding the left trigger, press A again. And you can now start queuing up movements. So what I like to do is actually have my scout go to the various corners of the map. That gives me pretty decent head start in seeing and getting some line of sight. So now if I press B to deselect, that scout is actually going to follow all those commands. And if I tap A, I can actually still see where I called all of those commands and see where he's actually running. Another thing too, let's say you're watching your scout, you're like, oh, well, let's go back to my town center because I need to issue some new orders, but you don't want to scroll all the way up. It's going to take forever, especially on larger maps. You can simply just press down on the D-pad. It's going to take you back to your starting town center. It's also important to note in Age that they classify these buildings as economy, defensive, and military. You can kind of see this on the right-hand side of the screen. So these are all of the economy buildings that I can currently build in the first Age. And there's some that actually, it tells me I need to be to the next Age to get these buildings. For me, actually, I need to build my House of Wisdom. So I will be building that here. But if I wanted to build, let's say, a defensive building, including walls, if you press down on the D-pad, it's actually going to now change and show me all of the defensive structures. And then if I press right on the D-pad, it's going to show me my military buildings, including a barracks, an archery range, and a stable. Now, I'm playing as Abbasid, so I actually do not have technically what's called an Age Up building. That's going to be through my House of Wisdom. That's unique to the civilization. But normally, with almost any other civ in the game, you're going to age up by actually making a unique building. If that were the case, if you hit right trigger, there's, as you see, left, down, and right on the D-pad. Up on the D-pad would actually be how you select that Age Up building. So just keep that in mind if you're going to be playing any other civ besides Abbasid here. Age of Empires also has a find button, which I think is pretty cool, and that's through the left bumper. So if we press the left bumper, it shows me the quick find, and you can actually kind of really get into the weeds here. You can... so I'll give you an example. Land military units right here by moving my analog stick to the left. If I just tap A, it's going to actually select that scout from earlier. If I press X, it's actually just going to locate it for me. So the same is true here. Like, let's say I want to find my town center. You can actually have multiple town centers in Age of Empires. So X will take me there. But let's say I'm back at that military unit by pressing left on the D-pad. That actually also cycles between military units, just like how up on the D-pad cycles between villagers. But if I'm back here and I want to select that town center, I'll press A. And now I can create new units if I want to while I'm staring away from the town center. So the difference between this going through the find and actually going back here is I don't have to actually look at the town center to select it. So that's huge. Like if you're in a big battle or an engagement with an opponent or something, and you want to make sure you keep training villagers or getting that upgrade that you want, you can do it this way instead of looking away from your units, you know, selecting the town center and then moving the camera or navigating back to what your military units were doing. Also, a quick tip it shows you down here at the bottom is if you want, you can actually, since you need houses all of the time here on Age of Empires to increase your population, you can just hold down X when you have a villager selected, and that quickly brings up a house for you to build. Pretty cool. Age of Empires also has what's called villager management tools for you to use, and this is very similar to what we saw in Age of Empires 2 on console. You can activate this by holding left trigger and then clicking the right stick. I know it's a little confusing, but there are all of these priorities, if you will, that you can choose for your villagers to do. And what happens is when you do this, your villagers will automatically start doing these tasks for you if you find it too complicated or too cumbersome to manage your own villagers. So we see actually right here on screen, I have, I don't know, it says I have 13 idle villagers next to this mill is my guess. Let's say I want to do the basic one. I just tap A on that, and then we actually give it a second. And the villagers are automatically going to start running to various places to do these various tasks. It did come up there and say there was some sort of an error, I think, with stone, because there's not stone close enough. It looks like there is right here, but I guess that's up to them, I guess, to decide. I'm actually unsure if they're going to create drop-off buildings or not. What I mean by this is this lumber camp here is a drop-off building, and this mill right here is a drop-off building. But you want to actually build drop-off buildings closer to the resource to eliminate this travel distance that the villagers are currently doing. They do this in Age of Empires 2, but I don't think they're doing this here. But it's actually, in my economy, is fully autonomous now. I am automatically training those villagers, like I mentioned earlier. And these villagers are automatically doing these tasks that I asked of them. Okay, so yeah, they are going to stone. Very good. And they're splitting this up appropriately that we see on the graph. Just a few on stone, and more on gold, more on wood, and the most on food. And that's what we see here. You can also do things where, like, let's say you're looking somewhere and you're like, oh, geez, this is a great spot. I really want to build something right here, but I don't necessarily want to select a villager and go through the process of moving them and queuing up the building, all this stuff. You can actually make it even simpler for you. If you're just looking somewhere, you can just press the right trigger, and it brings up this radio menu. And this is how you do things like send different pings, which I find very helpful when you're playing. You can send actually all your military there as well. Just go up, and you can see my scout is running in that direction. Let's say, oh, I want to build a barracks here. So we just go over, hit build. It's going to select a villager of some sort, and then I use, again, the D-pad to go over to the military, select my barracks, and press A, and it's just going to find a villager close enough to go ahead and build that building. I find that so huge. That's a huge advantage over PC. I feel like for those of you who are learning the game for the first time, that's really, really cool. You can also do something where you can send a monk, which is actually pretty underrated as well, and that comes into play with things like sacred sites. You can take this to get a little bit of gold income, but it's also a win condition. And the relics right here, you could probably just look right there and say collect relic, and a monk would head that way. Okay, so I've now aged up, and I have a little bit of military units, so let's kind of actually play around with abilities on how we can select our various military buildings. Again, you can tap left on the D-pad to select various military, cycle through them and select them. You can hold left on the D-pad and you select all of your military, which is actually very important. That's probably going to be one of your most used commands here, is holding left on the D-pad to select all of your military. And pressing A, remember, queues up a regular movement. However, with military, you can also do what's called an attack movement. We see some men over here, looks like. If I press X, that's called an attack move. That means these units are going to move to that destination that I told them to do. But they're actually going to attack any units they see in contact along the way, which is what they're going to do to this scout. And actually, I hate to interrupt myself, but if we're going back right here, I didn't tell these villagers at all to do these farms by this town center. They are actually doing that because they ran out of sheep, and they are ordered to continue to do food. And that's exactly what they're doing. So shout out to the villagers for automatically building these farms. We love to see it. So going back here to the military, let's say, oh, out of all of these units, I just want to select the spearmen. Well, what you can do is if you hold actually left trigger, it brings up a new directional menu down here at the bottom. So if I hold left trigger, then hold up, I'm actually going to select all of my melee units. So these spearmen Okay, so it's going to select the Cav anyway. So I'm actually incorrect here. It's classifying classifying the Cav as melee, which I guess makes sense. But I thought it was going to. There's ranged here, which I don't have any ranged units yet. But all right, so I'll do this again with Cav. Hold down on the D-pad, and now I've selected my Camel Riders and the Scout, and not the Spearmen. If I were to have archers, you could also split up your archers as well, and then finally siege, as we see down there on the left on the D-pad. All right, another thing too is, let's say I want to start training some more units, but I don't want to be mashing down A all the time to be training my archers or my crossbowmen, whatever. Well, actually, what's really cool is I can highlight over right here on the archery range, and I want to train 5 archers. I can simply just hold down left trigger and tap A, and now I'm queuing up 5 archers. So if you want to queue up units 5 at a time, that's a great way to do it. So you no longer have to mash down A to train all of your units. Okay, next let's talk about control groups, or how the game likes to call it on console, regiments, which I find to be actually a pretty cool term. You can create control groups for certain types of units instead of kind of messing around with the triggers and the directional buttons to select various types of units or all your units. Let's say I like this party of units here as kind of a raiding party. Looks to be, I don't know, about 10 units or so. I love these kinds of units. So let's make this a regiment. What you want to do is select these units, and then you actually want to press in both of the triggers. And now this radio menu comes up for you to create regiments. We're just going to select this one up here because that's 1. Press A, and now we have all of these units here. You'll see the number 1 appear. So while I can, yes, individually control some of these units by doing different things, like let's say, yes, I still want to select all my melee units, whatever, I can also keep continuing to select all of those units I put in control group 1. How do I do so? Well, I just look somewhere, hit both triggers, go up here, and now I have that control group 1 selected once again. So it makes it really easy for you to just kind of look around, move these units, or you can select individual units of that group to move different directions, but you can always go back and select that group. Now let's say, oh, I love this control group, but I want to add this archer into it. Well, that's totally fine as well. Just select the archer on its own. Once again, both triggers, go up here, and X is to actually add stuff. So I tap X, and now it's gone up to 14. He has the number 1. And now I can add that archer into that control group. Same goes with removing as well, by the way. Let's say I don't want this camel. Actually, I'll make it easier for this scout. I don't want him in that control group anymore. So I select the scout, control group, go up, Y. Looks like actually Y removes the whole thing. So don't listen to me on that. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about here in Age 4 is advanced movements with the camera, particularly using the minimap, because I think an advantage that someone may say that a mouse and keyboard player has over a console player is being able to click and drag across the minimap. And you know what, you're probably right, but this is actually ripped pretty much straight from Age of Empires 2, is you can press RB and enlarge this minimap, and a whole lot of options become available to you. The first is you can send pings by using up, left, or right on the D-pad, which is huge to notify your teammates. Also, if you press right on, press in your right stick, you can create like these viewing flags of some sort. And by actually cycling through using the right stick, you can actually go to all of these custom viewpoints, which I think is really cool. Like, let's say you want one right at your base, and you want one where you're attacking, something like that. You can certainly do that, and the way you get back to it again is right bumper, and then you start navigating with that right stick, and if you want to clear that, you just hold down on the D-pad and they all go away. So now I have this open. I want to look very quickly right here. You can see using left on the analog stick moves this around. If you press Y, you're going to actually jump right to it. And in fact, if you hold Y, you can start quickly panning on the camera as well. So there's a lot of movement here going on. Nonetheless, I think that's pretty cool. So you want to jump there real quick. Boom, there you are. And once again, don't forget that you can cycle between your landmarks by hitting down on the D-pad, cycle through your military units with left, or select them all. Same goes with villagers. Looks like you can't select all your villagers by holding up on the D-pad, and that's probably for the best. Once again, be cautious of using Y to select all on-screen units, because you will be selecting villagers, or in what I just did here, is if you already have villagers selected, you'll tell them to garrison. And then in order to do that, you actually have to go to the TC and get them out of there. Nonetheless, that is the controller tutorial for Age of Empires 4. There is quite a lot to break down here, so please feel free to reference this video again as you continue to learn how to use the controller on Age of Empires. And overall, not only is the game phenomenal, it's one of my favorite games of all time, but I think they've done a pretty good job letting us use the controller to our advantage in Age 4 on console. Let me know your thoughts. Do you love Age 4 on console? Do you love using the controller? Do you find it a little bit cumbersome or too slow compared to mouse and keyboard? Let me know your thoughts down below. And again, we're making Age 4 on console tutorial videos, gameplays, guides, all that sort of stuff. There'll be a playlist for you to check all that out. And we already have about 200 multiplayer games from the PC version on the channel for you to check out. And we'll be posting console videos as well. All right, that's going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, everybody. And I'll see you, James.